Welcome to the World History video. What have we learned about America, China, Mexico, Africa, Russia so far? So America has finally rebelled. The colonies gained their independence. Of course, it will also have an impact on Europe, so we last left off here. But this issue is not limited to America, because challenging a monarchy in England is not well received. In Europe, the people of France in Europe are saying that it seems things can be done without a king. Therefore, an uprising will also begin in Europe. There will be a revolution. Indeed, world history will be rewritten. Let's get started. What happened between 1800 and 1900? Welcome. Now look, we will travel around the world completely. We will start from Japan, pass through China, and discuss all of Europe with you between 1800 and 1900, because we are heading towards World War I. So, I need to prepare an environment for you before the World War. At this point, people around the world are starting to discover small technologies little by little. I will also mention this for the video. The steam engine is what changed the 1900s. I apologize. It is what changed the 1800s. If you automate things with that pressure machine using steam pressure, the state of the world will change. It will continue to change until the end of World War I. In World War II, while coal and steam ruled the world until World War I, fossil fuels and so on will come into play during World War II. But at the point we are today, we are first in America. The situation in America is that independence has been achieved. There is no longer an America that is dependent on England. There are 13 independent states. These 13 independent states are in conflict with each other. Why? Because debts have been borrowed from France and various parts of Europe, but no state wants to pay that debt. One says it's the other state's responsibility, and the other says no, it's the other state's responsibility. There is no unity among them. Now, a few sensible leaders, including George Washington, say that there should be unity among them, but George Washington is not particularly inclined to become president or to unite them. In summary, they keep saying that let's have these 13 states act like a country in terms of foreign policy, making joint decisions on war, borrowing, lending, and so on. You can still fight among yourselves, but let our name be the United States of America. Benjamin Franklin and George Washington were already aware of the situation. These states could also try to consume each other. In Philadelphia in 1787, they finally gather. 12 of them come together. There is a lot of commotion for a long time because they argue, no, we are right, we are bigger. They gather in 1787. Now the meetings are taking a very long time. In other words, the meeting lasts so long that they need to come to a decision, and eventually both chambers agree on a system. Where did we see a system with two chambers? In England. The House of Lords, the House of Commons. This one does the same thing. It says, let us have a Senate and a House of Representatives. Each state should send 2 representative senators to the Senate, regardless of its size or population. This gives it a somewhat more noble atmosphere, but the House of Representatives is different. Each state should send 1 representative for every 30,000 population to the House of Representatives. Don't forget this number of $30,000. Towards the end of the video, an event will arise from this $30,000. These 2 assemblies will work together, so the House of Representatives will be referred to as Congress by the vote of the Charter. You hear this a lot in films in America, something about the approval of Congress and so on. But they are trying to construct the system in such a logical way. There should also be a president to oversee all of this. There should be a high court that will also oversee the president. Thus, each one checks the other. No one can hold power like that of a monarchy. England has been a very good lesson for this. The problem is that they can't find a president. Because they can't find one, they are pressuring George Washington. Come on, you be the one. Is George Washington flirting now? Is he really trying to retire? The man is getting old. He is trying to stay away somehow. Now they are starting something in 1987, but the Constitution doesn't settle until December 15th, 1791, because each state announces this to the public through newspapers. The people are revolting, and their representatives say, the Constitution is fine, but I want a law that guarantees the king will not act like a king, that he will not declare himself excessively powerful. So they add something called the Bill of Rights, consisting of 10 amendments to the Constitution. You are currently seeing the American Bill of Rights on the screen. Let me tell you about the important ones among the 10 articles. The first article states that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. You can read down below if you want. It definitely and absolutely prevents a king from emerging. They go to George Washington's farm. Either become president, he says, I don't want to. They insist, just do it, and after persuasion, he finally says, okay, I'll do it, but only for 4 years and I won't do it again. Look, elections have been held every 4 years for the past 10 years, and they always take place on the same date. There are no early elections or late elections. There are no suspicious events regarding them. Washington serves as president for 4 years. Why does Washington want this? Because they are still afraid that someone will rise up and declare themselves king. Washington serves for 4 years, then says he will quit. Even though he never ran for election again, they elect him for another 4 years. After those 4 years, he really steps down. No one in the world easily rejects the presidency like that again. But it is bringing order to America, because that transitional period of the colonies is very important in America. Now let's turn to Europe. France. French soldiers personally fought against the King of England, helping the colonies to achieve independence. Now, when these soldiers return to their country, Louis XVI is on the throne. Louis XVI is the husband of Marie Antoinette. By the way, Marie Antoinette did not say that if they can't find bread, they should eat cake. Let me clarify that for you. This is a ridiculous fabrication. But still, Marie Antoinette loves a bit of luxury, and spending very much. She lights everything in the garden with candles, a mad woman, throwing money around with all the flowers. Anyway, we'll get back to our topic now. The main issue is that Louis XVI is on the throne, and his grandfather, Louis XIV, is already spending money to build a palace. He's wasting it on ridiculous things. The Palace of Versailles was built during a time when such strange fantasies of palace construction were impoverishing the country. It seems it was built later. The Palace of Versailles is being constructed during the 14th century. I mentioned it in the last video. It's an enormous palace. There is another palace built later that is twice as big. Still, the people are becoming poorer. Then comes the 15th century, which leads to a great war known as the 7 Years' War. The 16th century also spends money like crazy, and the people are disturbed. The French soldiers return and say that victory has been won against the king. The French people also say that it seems there is no need for a king. France was divided into 3 groups. Louis and Marie Antoinette are translating an interesting group, nobles, but Marie Antoinette has written complaints and such in her diary and letters. I even apply my lipstick around others, while others are around. We eat our meal while others are present. At that time, Louis and Louis's grandfather sold this along with the palace. He always eats while there are people around. There is something strange. They will show off. The nobles are standing by while he is eating his meal. The nobles are sitting on the couch, and the nobles are lying down. In summary, they love sycophants. The sycophants are there making deals, you see. In summary, the people are divided into 3 groups. At that time, consider that 99% of the population of France, which had a population of 26 to 25 million, consisted of the Third Estate, which included tradespeople and ordinary people. The first elite layer of the remaining 1% consists of people of the Catholic faith, a strange phenomenon that also led to the downfall of France during that period. Catholicism is very strong. The king favors these Catholic religious people, the nobles, and so on. The second layer consists of the wealthy, the nobles. The third layer is the tradesmen, the common people. Louis does not collect much tax from the clergy or the church. He tries to collect a bit from the nobles but is unsuccessful. However, he transfers the entire tax burden to the people, imposing it on 99% of the 25 million population. The people are not happy either because taxes are constantly increasing. They also want a lot of taxes. After a while, the idea of rebellion starts to appeal to them. Marie Antoinette is described as a wild girl who arrived at the palace at the age of 16. She has various fantasies, including having a small village built for herself within the palace. She loves playing the role of a milkmaid. I don't know what kind of fantasy that is. There is a ceramic and gold milk bucket that I will bring to the screen. He takes this and plays milkman. I apologize, but I hope this does not show disrespect to the deceased. I don't know what kind of fantasy it is. There is a village over there. Go live there to your heart's content. No, it doesn't mingle with the people. They are spending money on extravagant clothing. Enormous gambling is taking place in the palace in the meantime. Money is flowing like water. It is unbearable in Aachen. The expenses of the palaces were very high at that time. For some reason, the people's money was being spent ruthlessly during that period. In fact, despite excessive spending in the 14th and 15th centuries, Marie Antoinette cuts the bill in the 16th century. As the Declaration of the People in America is read in French, the public is getting increasingly agitated. They are rebelling, saying that they will not pay more taxes. Louis XVI turns to the nobles and says, "Since we cannot tax the common people, let the rich contribute a bit." The rich respond that it doesn't work that way. Let the nobles, Catholics, and the third class attend the meeting, and let's make a common decision together. They should pay as well. It shouldn't just come to us. Louis is calling Ergen to a meeting, but at the meeting, the tradespeople coming from the third class are treated like fifth-class dogs. I apologize. They are not being let in through the front gate of the palace. They are being taken in from the side. They lock the doors for large meetings and do not let them in. This is driving the situation to a breaking point. These people are already defiant, saying they will not pay taxes. When you call them to the palace and treat them like dogs, they even make them wear black. They say, "Don't wear colorful clothes." These people are going completely crazy. Moreover, consider that they want common voting rights, equal voting rights. That is, one vote for a population of 25 million. One vote for Catholics, one vote for the wealthy. When the wealthy and nobles say no, it becomes 2 votes, leaving them with 1 vote. When they are not included in the meeting, they get angry, meet at a tennis court outside the palace, and declare the National Assembly. They describe themselves so beautifully that even some Catholics and clergymen join them. A few nobles also get involved. The situation is turning. That Louis XVI is getting a bit suspicious. It would be better if things stopped here. Louis is restless. He says, "These people are going to rise up." The French soldiers say, "Attack." The French people, upon hearing about the National Assembly event at the tennis court, begin to march towards the palace to offer their support if they can. The Paris area gets stirred up first. French soldiers are starting to hesitate. "I won't shoot at the French people." This time Louis is escalating the situation. He is protecting himself. The Swiss guards are being deployed. They say, "Go and storm Paris." The public is going completely mad. At that time there is the Bastille prison. The Bastille prison is actually a fortress. There are those who have been arrested among them inside. There is gunpowder in the castle. There are cannons and such. They are storming the Bastille fortress. It is still celebrated as Independence Bastille Day. They are storming the Bastille, taking the gunpowder and seizing the weapons. Therefore, they are now raising the flag of rebellion. Coincidentally, it happens to be July 4th. Just as July 4th is Independence Day in America, it is also celebrated as Bastille Day on July 4th by the French. While all this is happening, the people are storming everywhere. The rural population is breaking into the homes and castles of the rich. The people are taking action. Here is your revolution. What is happening here? They are catching the 16th, Lou, like a chick in their hands. They are saying, "What shall we do with our 16th, Lou?" Because some of the people are saying, "Let's hang him." Some say, "If we are going to govern the country with a monarchy again, then we need this." The matter is left quite unclear. They lock it away in a palace to keep it there until we decide what to do. Marie Antoinette is being packaged. Actually, if she waited her turn, the public would soften towards this, but no. He is setting up an escape for himself. Just as he is about to escape, he will approach the fish with the horses and flee. When someone on the road sees this, they say, "Oh, that's the king on the money," and report it. He gets caught again. When caught, someone experiences another misfortune in the 16th century. The Prussian army says, "Do not touch Louis XVI." Hoppa. The people say that if the French people are saying "Don't touch Louis XV," then it means that Louis XV is the homeland's pride. The Prussian army will be unleashed upon us. Louis's situation is getting increasingly heated. Therefore, 20,000 people storm the place where he is held. This is execution by guillotine. Execution by guillotine initiates something very dangerous. Afterward, a series of executions begins. Certain groups are expelled from the country. Of course, this also leads to impoverishment, but many people's minds are affected. Executions by guillotine have become so commonplace that a guillotine is set up in the village square. Here, a woman is sewing while children are playing over there, and over there, they are chopping off heads. England, Spain, and the Netherlands are getting uneasy here. They declare war on France because they do not want that freedom movement to spread to them. A month later, they behead Marie Antoinette. A total of 16,000 heads are cut off at the guillotine in France, and now France begins to be governed by 2 assemblies. There are also 2 assemblies here, the 1760s. Let's move on to Russia now. We have dealt with France. There has been a renewal movement since Peter in the 1760s. Katerina initially loves both Catherine the Great and the West. She enjoys the innovations from the West, but fears that the wave of freedom from the French will come to her as well. Katerina's father is German and her mother is Swedish. So how did she come to the throne? In fact, her sister was a noble in the palace, and while she was getting married and so on, she somehow meets her husband, Peter. Peter. Is he the grandson of Peter? I won't get into that now. Peter the Great. Initially, Peter the Fairy loves Catherine, but later, as he becomes more consumed by his inner turmoil, he starts to constantly belittle her. Katerina is also a very intelligent woman. She is constantly working to improve her relationships with the army and the nobles in the palace. People are starting to get bored of Peter and are beginning to like Catherine. One night at a party, Peter I drunkenly says to Catherine, "You foolish woman, you stupid woman, if I wanted I could hang you or cut you," and then he passes out. Catherine responds, "Oh, is that so?" She is leaving for the main palace, and in the morning, she dresses very elegantly. She dresses as if she is going to ascend the throne. He is also pushing the army. He is having Peter's palace stormed. He is declaring himself sanctified and proclaiming his queenship. When the St. Petersburg Church approves this, the people say nothing. Long live the Queen. The king has stepped aside. He works 15 hours a day. For 30 years, he has been concerned with how to restore the country without interruption. A hard-working woman. During that period, it is acquiring land from the Ottomans, taking land from the Mongols, and partially taking Poland. In other words, it is expanding its territories and consolidating its economy. It brings women to the forefront of society to some extent, modernizing society as much as possible, but not too much, because it does not want the events in France to spill over to itself. Returning to the world, let's leave Russia here. In 1769, James Watt developed a steam system. The event here is very simple. There is water in a boiler, which is heated from below. It is generally preferred to heat it with coal. The steam rises and enters the pistons, pushing the piston upwards. When the steam is discharged from there and condenses back into the boiler, the piston falls down. Now, this is actually not something invented by James Bond, but it makes things easier to transport with less fuel, and they are putting it on locomotives, trying it on ships, testing it in cars, and eventually, it is also being integrated into machines in factories. Therefore, the need for human labor is decreasing, and rapid production is beginning. This rapid production is opening a new era and initiating industry. Now, the need for coal used to generate steam is booming. Coal mining. Coal mining develops to such an extent that children are working in these mines. I will explain about the children shortly. Everywhere is turning into a coal mine. At first, they extract coal from areas near rivers and transport it using barges, that is, rafts. Then they notice that the coal there is running out. They go to places farther from the river for richer deposits. This time they invent steam trains to transport the coal, I said, and they develop it. Thus, railroads are spreading rapidly within England. They will also spread to the world from England, but it takes about 50 to 100 years for this to reach America. Thus, railroads are spreading all of a sudden. In 1765, a person named Eli Whitney is born. This person called Whitney is making great inventions. He has two major inventions. The first is the cotton gin. The cotton gin is a system that can do the work of 15 slaves in collecting and processing cotton in 1 hour. It allows you to process cotton more easily. Therefore, because cotton is processed faster with this cotton gin, more slaves are needed. Normally, you would say it's nice that one person is doing the work of 15 slaves. There should be no need for slaves. No, suddenly, cotton cultivation spreads. As he said, cotton begins to be planted in the lands. The need for slaves increases. After all, the machine is working, so there are more slaves, and it is rapidly increasing slavery. Its second invention is something more interesting. The second invention is the spare parts system. How, until this period, weapons are made for individuals, and when a weapon breaks down, there is only one thing you can do. You take it to the master who made the rifle and say, change this part to fit this one. No. Whitney says, let's produce standard weapon parts so that the parts of all weapons fit each other. This way, the army can advance quickly. If a part is broken, remove the trigger mechanism. You can put in another suitable trigger. Think of it like mass production, but don't think of it like Ford's mass production. This is a spare parts system. Replaceable, meaning a system of interchangeable spare parts. And when all the parts come to a standardization, what is primarily invented is standardization itself. The situation suddenly becomes exciting. The troops are advancing more comfortably. There is no need to constantly carry the weapon to the front and give up the master. Besides, you don't have such a luxury. Therefore, he is the owner of two great inventions that changed the world. Of course, there is a downside to this. While it sounds very nice, factory-made fabric is produced faster and cheaper than handmade fabric. the people begin to become poorer. Those who produce fabric at home are left out and enter the factories. This is where the birth of factories leads to child labor. What causes child labor? Factories first start employing women. It is said that they work faster than men. Their hands are quicker, and they are healthier. Then they say that they can employ children for cheaper, and the children stop going to school. There is no school, no education. All the children are sent to factories. There are children working 16 hours a day. The children are only given food, they can relieve themselves a bit, and they are made to work like slaves. But you can see the photos of those children on the screen right now. In America, in Europe, and in Canada, children are being worked like dogs. They are made to work in poor conditions. Don't assume the pain existed only in the 19th century. Child laborers were also present in the 20th century. There are two empires in the world that do not follow all these developments and say, just relax, we are a world empire anyway. One is the Ottoman Empire, the other is China. China thinks of itself as the center of the world. They say, let no one come to us and let us not go to anyone. Their libertarian, revolutionary ideas should not infect our country. They even prohibit us by saying, do not come to our country. They are receiving ships coming from England and America at a single port. Ships are prohibited from docking at other ports. They are trading at that port. From that port, they only sell goods. They sell tobacco, spices, and tea. They don't even take anything. Europe is obviously annoyed. They keep sending money to them. Their tea, silk, and spices are very nice, but China doesn't want anything. They just say, give us money. Gold and silver. Gold and silver. This leads to an outflow of money from Europe, but there is no money coming in from China in foreign trade. China particularly wants a single port because the captain of an English, Dutch, or American ship that docks at that port. It is forbidden to speak directly with other Chinese people. It is also prohibited for them to teach their own language or to learn the Chinese language. However, one can only speak with a Chinese person through a government-appointed translator. They are under very strict supervision. Every outbreak of strict control leads to smuggling. Europe says they cannot sell anything to these people, no matter what they try to sell. And the British in India start selling opium to them. The East India Company belongs to Britain. The British are producing opium in India and gradually starting to sell it to China. They are selling it illegally at a few ports. It is spreading so much that 1 in every 3 Chinese people is getting high, feeling dizzy, falling down, and fainting. As a result, the Chinese people become incredibly addicted. Britain turns the Chinese into addicts. They start receiving money from China in a crazy way. That King George III looks so greedily at the money in China. From Britain, in fact, during that time, a saying emerges about the reading stands and factories in Manchester. They say that if every Chinese person wears a garment 1 finger long and 2 fingers long, we will become rich. Their only concern is to sell something to China. The best thing they can sell is drugs. They press the poppy to extract the opium, then turn it into powder and form it into pills. They continuously sell these pills in powder or pill form to China. Until 1839, the Emperor of China continuously warns Britain, saying things like, don't do it, my king. Please, I have made my people into addicts. In 1839, China raids all the opium depots. Britain seizes these stocks from the ships, and a war breaks out. It lasts for 3 years, but China loses. There is the First Opium War, and then there is also a second one with the French. They lose. As a result, Britain gains access to all ports. This is where things turn quite unpleasant, as all ports begin to be exploited in that manner. If you have entered a country's ports, and if those ports have been sold, and if the leaders of that country have granted you easy access to the ports, that country will gradually begin to lose its identity. It becomes a slave to imports. By force, you sell whatever you want to that country. Between 1856 and 1860, there is again the Opium War. This time, the French also join the British in the fight. They lose this as well. This time, Beijing falls. 10 new trade centers are opened. China is forced to open up to the world even more. Japan is in the same situation. Japan is also closing itself off from the outside, but in 1853, the naval forces arrive here. It demands special privileges for 2 ports. It says, I will enter, you cannot interfere. Japan also ends its policy of isolation. In 1853, in the years around 1866, And 1868, there were uprisings by the daimyos against the shogunate. Japan is entering a period of restoration, and there is also a cultural change. In fact, they are moving the capital from Kyoto to Tokyo. They begin to change the army, and cultural reforms start. Japan begins to open up to the world. Of course, there are positive aspects as well, such as the abolition of the daimyo and samurai system, and they transition to a constitution. But by the year 1900, they develop such a fast education system that by 1900, 98% of the society is literate. Look, the Japanese have managed to extract positivity from every trouble that comes their way. At the end of World War II, as you know, the Japanese quickly recover and become one of the world's major economies. Japan is strengthening so rapidly that it enters into war with China in 1894, involving its army, shipyards, and factories for a duration of 2 years. Who will govern Korea? Japan is clashing with China. Who wins? Japan wins. Let me take it further. In 1904, Russia attacks the Japanese. Although the events of the 1900s are not the subject of this video, who wins? Japan wins. The West is also surprised. They are asking, what is it with these Japanese? Although this isn't good, later the Japanese become very enthusiastic. You know there is a polar event, but we will talk about that during the periods of World War I and World War II. Of course, the Japanese situation will extend until the Russian Revolution, meaning in the East, because the cards are being reshuffled. Now we have arrived at France's troubled period. Every society has one dictator in history. I mean, I won't give an example now, like Hitler, for instance. It is the era of Napoleon in France. Now we have left Napoleon in the assembly, meaning there were 2 assemblies, but this assembly will go to war with Australia. France calls the person at the head of this assembly a guide. A guide, like a president but not a president, is referred to as an executive guide. The guide generally chooses Napoleon Bonaparte. Now, it is not the direct urban threat from Australia to France, but rather the side of Australia that faces Italy, specifically the northern provinces of Italy, which at that time consists of small sections or regions rather than being unified states. When Napoleon receives the order from the assembly, he charges into Italy. He takes all the Italian provinces that Austria has. The Australians are retreating. After this event, Napoleon thinks, so I must be quite a big person, and he loses his composure. Napoleon says since coming here, he will save the people of Italy, and as he advances in Italy, he advances. The man is diving into all of Italy. The trouble starts looting in Italy. You know that Noor Museum you see today, which can be visited in 2 to 3 days? Half of it is from the French that they stole from Italy. They still won't give it back today. Napoleon loots every museum, wealthy home, and painting in Italy, sending them all to France, specifically to the Louvre Museum. He even steals the gold and silver from the church. But they say, we are taking your gold and silver to keep it in a safe place, and they steal it. Anyway, he took those too. Then he says, if I'm taking Italy, I might as well take Austria as well. Napoleon is crazy, completely insane. It is supported by such an army that Austria says, all right, Vienna, let's make peace. But they respond, no, don't come into us. They give Belgium and Lombardy to him to prevent Napoleon from attacking. Napoleon says, well, since I've taken what I was supposed to, I won't take any more. Now there is a problem here. Napoleon is returning to his country. When he returns, the people treat him like a king. You are great. Go ahead. You've put Austria in its place after all. Napoleon is saying, oh my God, what is happening to me? He truly believes that he should be the one to govern the country. The man is seriously getting into this mindset. The guide at the assemblies is waking up to the situation. He says that if we keep Napoleon in the capital, he will stage a coup with his army. They say, let's send this. They unleash Napoleon on Britain. They say the parliament has decided, you will go and take Britain. Napoleon says that he is naturally inclined. They are sending me to my death, because Britain's army is far superior to France's navy. Pardon, the navy. There is an island in between. The English navy is much better than France's. Napoleon takes a look and says, no, father. He didn't eat. He says, no, our priority is Egypt. He says he will take Egypt. Now, Egypt is under Ottoman control. The French do not like the Ottomans at all right? Check. That's settled. Secondly, the assembly thinks like this. Egypt is farther away. Let's send Napoleon to fight with the Ottomans for years. By the time he returns, we will have already established the system. They say, all right, coach, go take Egypt. Napoleon sets off. As this person sets out towards Egypt, the British receive news of it. They say, he is going, but let's see where he is going. They begin to follow him, trying to learn where he will step and where he will invade. Napoleon is moving, capturing Cairo and Alexandria. He is walking seriously. When he takes Egypt and Cairo, the British Navy suddenly learns where he is. And Napoleon's fleet encounters Britain's fleet on the Nile. They encounter each other. They are encountering. In a great war, Napoleon is losing. He sends a ship and sells his soldiers, heading back to France. News has not yet reached France. Napoleon has taken Cairo, but it is not known that he is at war with the British. As soon as he arrives, he says, I am very good. I am very important. I should govern the country. Delhi is storming the assembly, staging a coup, seizing power, changing the constitution, and saying he will declare war, claiming he wants all of Europe. Now the same mindset as Hitler is here. He wants all of Europe. Everyone wants all of Europe. Forget about the war he lost with Britain in the chaos. He is taking over the country like a servant. After taking over the country, there is no money, and they will go to war. He thinks and thinks, where can I find the money? If you remember from the previous video where I talked about the French in American history, they had territories they seized in America. Napoleon says that either he cannot establish a colony in America, which is on the other side of the world, or he might as well sell it to America. He is serious and asks, shall I sell you this land? Americans also say, sell, Dad. Really? But in such a way that in one day, without any fighting, America's territory doubles. So, I am already bringing it to the screen. You can see how good it is. They sell an area of 2.1 million square kilometers. For $15 million in 1803, they only charge about 7 cents per hectare. With this sale, American territory doubles. Moreover, an expansion to the west begins. I will explain shortly. Let me enter the same point. When these lands were acquired during Thomas Jefferson's era, an expansion to the west started. They were cramped on the east coast. As they advance westward, a genocide is being carried out against all the Native Americans in these lands, which the French never laid claim to. There are millions of Native American victims of genocide. As the Americans advance, they keep firing. They raid the villages, but I will explain about the steelworkers and so on shortly. Now let's continue with France. Let me finish with Napoleon. He is holding a fortification ceremony and sitting on the throne. I am declaring war on Britain, he says, and I will load 150,000 soldiers and cannons onto boats, he says. He instructs to build boats that will carry 150,000 soldiers. The fleet will cross the channel with the boats and land troops on the shores of England, pardon me, and I will win the war, he says. I will invade Britain, pardon me. He has set up the strategy very well, going with a 4-4-2 formation. No, a 4-2-4 formation, pardon me. In other words, he will send his fleet ahead. The French fleet will sink the British fleet. Once the coast is left completely empty, he will send the boats to the administration. He will send the soldiers by boat. This is not how it works. Without sinking a single British ship, the entire fleet is lost. The army is saying, am I stupid? Should I row my way to that fleet like a fool? So, the army does not go. It turns inward. Britain says, oh, since this one can't come, let's provoke him. It tells Russia and Austria, come on, you hit from behind and I'll help you. Russia and Austria declare war on this. The Russians and Austrians strike, destroying Austria. They take control of Austria's territories in Italy. They attack the Russians. At the helm of the Russians is Tsar Alexander I. His grandmother, or rather his ancestor, is Catherine, a clever fellow. Not brave, but smart. Alexander says, it's good you defeated me. He retreats all the way to Poland. He also retreats from Poland. Napoleon is excited. Napoleon is fiery. Napoleon launches an attack with 650,000 soldiers, putting the entire defense on the offensive. And it begins to seize Russian territories. Do you remember from the previous video? The Swedish army had also marched to Moscow and perished from freezing. Alexander is doing nothing. As they come, Alexander is retreating. He keeps retreating, but while doing so, he maneuvers the army as coldly as possible, aligning it with the winter. Napoleon's army, dressed in summer uniforms, burns and destroys everything in Russia, the fools. They loot and set fire to every village. They want nothing to remain to harm the Russians. Winter is coming. Alexander is retreating in Moscow. He is safe and sound. Napoleon's army begins to freeze. Napoleon starts to withdraw little by little. He realizes that this cannot continue. The soldiers are now advancing by stepping on the frozen soldiers every morning. It begins to melt there. They arrive at two bridges over the Berezina River, right on the Polish border, at the Russia-Poland border. It turns out the Russians had already destroyed and burned those two bridges. Out of 650,000 soldiers, only about 50,000 remain with Napoleon. Napoleon's army is in disarray. Napoleon will return to France without his army. The news of the dissolution of Napoleon's army is being heard in Italy, Germany, and Austria. At that very moment, in 1812, America and Britain enter into a pointless war for 1 to 2 years. Nothing happens. No one is gaining or losing anything, but Britain's interest is turning that way. Napoleon is returning to his country. He has about 50,000 soldiers and is trying to gather some troops. As Britain ends the war with America and turns its attention this way, it tells Prussia, Russia, and Austria, let's dive in. He says, let's deceive, and Napoleon goes mad again, leaving his country with his army. At the moment, the country goes out with the army they call Louis XVI to the throne. He has been deposed from the throne and lives in a distant place, and the empire is being dissolved. Is he left alone in this exile? He has no title. Napoleon's army is also gone. He has lost his army as well. They capture him and exile him to an 11-kilometer island called Elba. They give a small palace to maintain the pretense. It is there to uphold that lie so as not to lose their reputation. Ultimately, it serves as a figure to have a place in the eyes of the public. Tourists come and look at this. They mess around with the garden and eat seeds before leaving. I'm not joking. Tourism has really taken off. After a while, this person gets proud and very angry. In 1815, he secretly returns to France and convinces his generals, saying things like, "You used to be with me?" 3 weeks later, he ascends to the throne again. He gathers 72,000 soldiers. When he does this, Britain attacks him at Waterloo. So, Belgium, just as he was about to win the war. Napoleon's end comes when the Prussian army joins the aid of the British army. They exile him to an island 2,000 kilometers off the coast of Africa, called St. Helena. He dies there in 1821. Until Hitler, no other madman emerges claiming he will conquer Europe. Let's also close off France like this. In 1776, while writing the Declaration of Independence, they have the idea that all men are created equal. But within 10 years, they change this provision because they decide that slaves are not human. Now, slave labor is very necessary in the agricultural lands of the South because there is so much farming. The North does not use as many slaves. The Northerners want slaves to be treated like humans, while the Southerners want slavery to be abolished. There is also a dilemma here. Now, America is governed by a parliamentary system, whether in the North or the South, right? Therefore, those in the North say that slavery should be abolished. But on the other hand, if slavery is abolished, the large slave population in the South will suddenly be considered citizens. Since one person represents every 30,000 people in the House of Representatives, the moment slavery is abolished, the North's vote count in the House will decrease. On one hand, they are experiencing the chaos of this situation. It should be abolished, but at the same time, it shouldn't. Slaves are to be considered human but not citizens. In 1807, Britain says, "Do not bring new slaves from Africa." Slavery was abolished in Britain around the 1830s. In 1808, it was stated that no new slaves should be brought to America, but America continued to use slaves. Slavery in America does not end until the Civil War, which lasts from 1861 to 1865. It is abolished after this war. In 1795, a magazine in Paris offers a large reward to anyone who can create a map of Africa, specifically requesting that the person not be a non-Muslim, particularly not a Muslim. They say they will give 10,000 francs. By 1835, all of Africa is being explored. At that time, they refer to it as the Dark Continent. Because it is unknown what is inside, it is an unknown area on the map. Africa is being worked on by strange missionaries and such. The interesting situation in Africa is this. In 1824, 2 English traders arrive in a part of South Africa controlled by the Zulu. They somehow take the Zulu king captive and quickly spread there. After a while, they grow stronger. And to the south, there is a plantation and a city where the Dutch, known as Boers, like Frank de Boer, had arrived earlier. Because that city is richer, they also set their sights on it and take it over. The British are rapidly spreading within Africa, but the Dutch, who are from that land, are also moving into Africa. The beautiful white Africans you see today are from that generation, infiltrating Africa since the 1830s and 1820s. Let's return to the genocides in America. In 1803, this Louisiana and so on was acquired. Napoleon had sold it. By the 1830s, everyone started heading west. At that time, there were many Native Americans, meaning real Americans, in America. But there are 5 tribes that are very important. One is the Chicxulub, the second is the Choctaw, the third is the Seminole, the Cherokees, and the Crickler. At that time, the American President Andrew Jackson concocts something called the Indian Removal Act. The Chickatovler and Chicxulub are fleeing westward in fear of the whites. Along the way, they turn back and die. News of this reaches the remaining Cherokees, Seminoles, and Creeks. The Creek do not want to go, but the Americans chain them up and force them to leave. 3,500 Creek die on the way. They are freezing from hunger because they are going through very harsh conditions. When the Seminoles and Cherokees hear this, they want to arm themselves and resist. But the Americans kill all the Seminoles. After seeing the massacre that happened to the Cherokees, they slaughter them. There is genocide against babies, children, and everyone. The Cherokees are taking the matter to court. They struggle in court in America for 8 years. Meanwhile, the American army raids their homes and drags them away. The lawsuit has been a mere distraction. They are burning their homes and are being forcibly driven westward. They die of hunger on the way until they reach Oklahoma in 1838. Babies are left behind, dying. This journey is also referred to as the Journey of Tears, and we have reached the final event of this section, the American Civil War. The American Civil War actually begins with the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860. He wants to abolish slavery. The southern part is forming a union called the Confederation. The southern part wants slavery to remain. In 1861, the war begins when Summerford, also known as the Fortress, is captured by the Southerners. The Southerners initially launch an offensive, but in 1860 the Battle of Gettysburg occurs, which is a very important battle. It is also necessary to address American history. The Northerners stop the Southerners. The Southerners realize that they are not as strong as they thought. By 1865, 600,000 Americans have died, and finally, slavery is abolished. Yes, we have arrived at the 1900s. This will be the topic of the next video. During this period, nation-states are rising. People are learning to come together as much as possible and to become a country. Thank you for joining me in the World History Series. I hope it is enjoyable and pleasant. See you in the next video.